What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 predictions for the upcoming 2025 college football season. Up next is the Washington Huskies. Washington coming off a pretty solid year last year, pretty up and down year, an average type season in 2024. They were 6-7 overall last year in Jedd Fisch's first season. My thoughts on this team for 2025, I feel like Washington could be like a better team compared to last year. Their schedule is tough though, and that's kind of why I'm having a tough time with this prediction for this team, but I could definitely see them doing a lot better compared to my prediction when you're about to see later on. You look at this Washington team, offensively, quarterback position could be a concern because they lost Will Rogers, but I think Damon Williams will be ready to go for Washington. I think he's going to be the starting quarterback for this team, and I think I like the running backs for this team. They probably got one of the best running back rooms in the country. They got Jonah Coleman coming back at running back, one of the top running backs coming up mainly in the country. Offensive line, maybe that's a bit of a concern for Washington, but I think it will get better, and I like this defense a lot. I think this defense has a chance to be pretty solid for 2025. So let's now get to the schedule for Washington. Here's their schedule for 2025. Again, this team, they were 6-7 last year in 2024. So let's go game by game, and I'll give you my official prediction for Washington for 2025. And their first two games are pretty easy wins. Colorado State and UC Davis. You know, Colorado State is like a decent group of five team, like a quality group of five team, but they're not an elite group of five team, if that makes sense. They're not up there with the elite teams, if that makes sense as well. And yeah, I don't really expect Washington to struggle in that game against Colorado State, and I do expect them to score a bunch against UC Davis. So I think Washington will get off to a 2-0 start pretty easily to open up the 2025 season. After that, they get their first bye week, so they get a pretty early bye week before playing Washington State on the road here on September 20th. Of course, the rivalry game in the Apple Cup. You know, this game was pretty close last year. Washington State did prevail, though. I think it was a 3-point win for Washington State. And obviously, the Cougars are a team that I don't really study much because they're not like in a Power 4 conference. So, yeah, they're not like a Power 4 team or anything like that. They used to, but they do play in like a, I guess the Pac-2, whatever you want to call it. I know this is a rivalry game. Washington State's playing at home, so maybe that does give the Cougars the advantage. But when you look at the two rosters, again, I don't really study Washington State, so I can't really choose them here in this game. I usually just choose the Power 4 teams when it comes to like a, lesser non-conference game. And yeah, Washington can absolutely lose this game, but I just look at on paper, I feel like Washington is going to be a little bit better this year compared to Washington State. And that might be enough here to pull off a win. So I think the bye week also kind of helps out for Washington. They kind of get some time to recover, or not like recover, but they kind of figure out what they did wrong to Washington State last year. And so I think in the rivalry game, I think Washington will come out really focused. And I think their defense and their running game will make a difference in this one. And I think they wear down the Cougars on both sides of the football. And so I'm going to go Washington here in the Apple Cup to get revenge on the Cougars from last year. So I got Washington getting off now to a 3-0 start. And then they open up Big Ten play on September 27th with a home game against Ohio State here. The Buckeyes obviously going to have a lot of talent on their roster, of course, every year. But they get this one at home. So this is probably a big opportunity for Washington to get off an early upset. Ohio State obviously going to have a new quarterback. We just don't know how good Julian Saint is going to be. But everywhere else, the Buckeyes do have weapons. And that's definitely going to be probably a big disadvantage here for Washington. I think the only way that Washington can probably keep up with this Ohio State team is by running the football, but I don't know if they can run the football against this Buckeye defense. It's going to be pretty difficult to do that, but I think this is one of those games where it's probably, close in the first half, but second half, that's where the Buckeyes will probably pull away. So I think with a new quarterback, even with a new quarterback, I think Ohio State does win this one by at least double digits. So I'm going to say that Washington will lose this one against the Buckeyes. That's going to give them their first loss of the season, so that's going to put them at 3-1. And then they go on the road to play Maryland on October the 4th. I talked about this Maryland team a bunch, and I did say I don't like the roster for this team. I just don't know if they're going to be all that great this year. This could probably be a team that could be like the second to worst last team in the Big Ten this season. They do have a tough schedule as well. I mean, it's not really as tough as the other Big Ten teams are, but this is just a roster that just has so many question marks, and I just don't know if they're going to be really that great this year. So even on the road, I think Washington actually gets the win here. I do like their roster a lot better than Maryland, and I think Washington does get a big win here against the Terrapins on October 4th. That's going to put them at 4-1, and then they come back at home to play Rutgers on October 11th. You look at this matchup here. Both Washington and Rutgers have two really good running back rooms. I think it's going to be a game where it does come down to whoever has the better running back room, and definitely who could outgain each other on the running game. I mean, passing game, I would probably give the advantage to Washington. Both of these teams don't have like big passing, quarterbacks and everything. That's definitely going to be the question mark here for both of these teams. Rutgers did lose their top running back from last year, but I still think they'll be really good at running the football, and defensively, I would probably give the advantage to Washington as well, but home field advantage really is the difference here. I feel like this is a pretty even matchup. Flip a coin for me. I'm going to say that Washington will win it here just because of home field advantage. But again, I probably wouldn't be surprised if Rutgers did win this game, but I got to go with the Huskies here to get the win, and so that's going to put Washington now at 5-1. And then they go on the road to face Michigan on October 18th. This is one of those games where Washington, I feel like, is going to not come in really, focused for this one. I mean, I think they'll be focused, but I feel like Michigan's going to be even more focused. This is a Michigan team that will be out for revenge against the Huskies. Yeah, last year Washington beat Michigan, which obviously was probably a big surprise because on paper Michigan definitely was the more talented team, and they definitely are the more physical team. But first half of the year Michigan was not good, and then second half they got better and better. And yeah, I think this is a better Michigan team this year. I think the physicality of this team is going to definitely wear down this Washington team, and I just feel like Michigan's going to probably win this game big. So I think the Wolverines playing at home as well in Ann Arbor, that's a tough place to play. So I don't think Washington will win this game. I think Michigan wins by double digits, and I got them losing that game. That's going to put the Huskies now at 5-2, and then they play against Illinois on October 25th. I look at this Illinois team possibly being a top 15, top 20 type team. They do have a bunch of guys coming back on both sides of the football, including a veteran quarterback in Luke Allmeyer. Yeah, this is a home game here for Washington, which is definitely good news. You're coming in probably in this game with definitely you're going to be fired up because Illinois, they could probably be really good by this time, and it's definitely one of those upset alert type games. But you look at last week, playing against Michigan, could Washington be a little bit beat up heading into this game? That is very possible, and we've seen teams coming off last week's loss against like physical teams. Teams really get beat up after playing a physical team. So I think it's one of those games right here. I think Washington definitely makes this game into the fourth quarter, but I think Illinois' experience will be just enough, and I do trust Luke Allmeyer at quarterback more than the Washington quarterback. So I think Illinois actually gets the win here, even though it's at home here for Washington, but I can definitely see them winning that game nonetheless. That's going to put them at 5-3, and then they finally get their second bye week before playing Wisconsin on the road on November 8th. Wisconsin is a team that I talked about having so many question marks. Luke Fickell has just not been able to get it done here for the Badgers ever since he's got here. They have a tough schedule again this year, and also can they finally turn things around here for Wisconsin after a disappointing year last year? I think he can. Luke Fickell is a guy that I do trust to get it done. I know Washington gets a bye week here. I feel like both of these teams, though, are just pretty even. I feel like it's a pretty even matchup, 50-50 game, and I think this will be a close game. I think home field advantage probably going to be the difference in this one, so I think the Badgers do get the win here, and I'm going to say that Wisconsin will give Washington their fourth loss of the season. That's going to put them at 5-4, so 3 losses in a row there for the Huskies, but then they finally kind of get a break. They do play Purdue next here at home on November 15th. Purdue is a team that I don't think is going to be really all that great this year. I mean, nobody expects this team to be all that great. Let's be honest, Barry Odom is a great coach, but I just feel like it's going to take some time for this Purdue team to develop, and so I think Washington will definitely win this one by at least like 14 to 17 points. So not a blowout, but This is where Washington should be able to win pretty easily. And then after that, they play a road game against UCLA on November 22nd. I think this is definitely a potential trap game here for Washington. You look at this UCLA Bruin team, they could be a little bit better this year. I feel like this team is a little bit underrated. They still got some playmakers on the roster. They also added a transfer quarterback in Nico Amaliyava from Tennessee. Yeah, I think he's going to do pretty well for UCLA. Not great, but pretty well. And this is also in the month in November. You look ahead to next week. Can Washington be looking ahead to that Oregon game from next week? That probably could be likely what's going to happen in this game. So I think Washington, they will not be focused here for UCLA. They'll look ahead to next week, and I think that's going to cost them here in this game. Plus, it's on the road. That's a very tough place to play. So I think UCLA actually pulls off maybe a slight upset here, because on paper, Washington definitely does have the better roster, but UCLA, they can absolutely pull off a huge win here. So again, I think Washington will look ahead again to that Oregon game the next week, and that's going to put them at 6-5. And then they play Oregon here at home on November 29th to close things out. Obviously, this is a game that I feel like Oregon, they are the better team. First half of last year, Washington was right there with Oregon in the first half, but second half, that's where Oregon pulled away. Well, this year they're playing on the road here in Seattle. Washington definitely, I feel like, can make this a fourth-quarter type game. It is a rivalry game. Anything is possible. They can pull off an upset here, in my opinion, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I feel like Oregon is definitely the better team. Dante Moore, yeah, he's the new quarterback for the Ducks, but I feel like he'll be better by this time. So I feel like Washington will definitely be competitive, but it's not going to be enough to pull off the upset. I think Oregon gets it done here, and I got Washington losing to Oregon here in the final game of the season. So even though I feel like Washington is going to be definitely a lot better, I got this team finishing 6-6 because of how tough this schedule is. Again, you got Ohio State, Michigan, and Oregon. Those are three teams that could be in the top 25 this year, also in the playoff as well. Illinois is a team they can win that game. If they somehow win that game, then they'll probably go 7-5. I think it's also about that Washington State game. If they get off to a 3-0 start or a 2-1 start, it could be a disappointing season if they get off to a 2-1 start. But a 3-0 start, it will get them into a bowl game. But I think this team will be pretty solid in my opinion. 8-4, 7-5, 6-6. I think those are the most likely records for this team for 2025. So that's my prediction for Washington. Give me your prediction for this team, and let me know what you think about my prediction as well down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.